Morning, everybody. If you're catching this right now, it is maybe our earliest broadcast to date, but Friday, 9:14 a.m. So I wanted to make sure we got this in before my good friend JP goes and practices peace, serenity, and the art of beating people up in his Kung Fu reunion,
Yep,
which
for a
is
whole weekend.
awesome. Like on a mountain, exactly like it should be. That would have been the most disappointing part, by the way. If it wasn't on a mountain, I don't
The
know.
mountain is new, but happily we get to do it now.
So today we were talking about you are not an endless self-improvement project. And so might seem like a crazy little soundbite, especially because both JP and I are here helping people improve themselves in different ways, big and small. So there's actually a very specific tone to this in terms of in essence, not thinking that it has to be your entire identity. And I know JP also has more ways that he wants to talk about it. So cheers, my brother.
Yeah, so one of the things that if you go to a bookstore and you go to the self-help or self-improvement section, it may very well be the biggest section in the entire bookstore. And it tells you, excuse me, it tells you how much people are hungry for ideas around that. But one of the things people accidentally fall into is there's a few traps around self-improvement that are worth talking about. And really one of them is getting maybe over-attached is a right word. But a lot of people get so into different areas where they want to improve themselves and get so hungry for it that it can actually become destructive. And the thing we're going to spend a little time on today is not allowing the mindset of self-improvement become destructive, because if you try and push things too far too fast, if you accidentally fail with some of your goal setting, it's very easy to like keep doing I'm going to say pointless self-improvement after you've already achieved a goal. There's a few traps that are worth talking about, especially since we talk about self-improvement a lot. So I wanted to point those out because I deal with them a lot in my counseling practice, actually. So that's what we're going to spend our time on today.
Okay. And I feel like one of the other issues with that is too there's a pretty necessary step, when it comes to in essence really like just living a happy life, creating the type of life you want to live, I feel like. And it's realizing that creating your best life involves failing. We talked about this recently and a lot of times. And I feel like it's very easy when you first embark on a self improvement, like I said, lifestyle. When you do put yourself like, I am going to make this work, I am going to learn about these things, I'm going to put these things into action. It's very easy to go into that with an almost perfectionist attitude early on. Like, if I'm going to be the best that I'm going to be, I'm going to do this perfectly. And then when that invariably doesn't happen that way, it's like just kind of like you're saying it there. Like, do you beat yourself up about it, or do you simply, brush it off and take it as just, another attempt, a lesson, and pick yourself back up to where you were?
Yeah, or find out that something's not for you because you can fail your way into learning that something is not really what you want, what you're looking for.
A great point there. Yep. So hey, go ahead and go a little bit more about what you're talking about there, and like possibly going too far with it. And
So that one's a somewhat unique one to a very few areas. By far, the most common is different types of money improvements, like wealth building. One of the things that will happen a lot is, let's say I'm working with somebody with money anxiety, and they'll be like looking for the next job, the next promotion, the next investment, the next business to buy. Who knows? And one of the things that oftentimes I'll ask is like, well, okay, so what's your goal in wanting to make more money? What are you hoping to achieve with that? And that sometimes stumps people because one of the things about money is a means to something. It's not usually the thing we really want. Uh, it's a means to security. It's a means to luxury. It's a means to whatever you're looking for. And a lot of times when I ask, well, how much more do you need to get the life you want? Uh, after a few minutes of examining it, will actually find like everything you wanted to achieve with money, you actually have. So, what in the world do you
Ah,
need to buy a new business for or to get a promotion for? Like, what's the point? And they'll actually have many times by the time they get to me, they've overshot quite a lot. In fact, uh,
hmm.
and it involves like taking it. They've gotten so into improving their money situation that they kind of missed out on like, oh, it's as good as I need it to be.
So I had this conversation 2 nights ago with, uh, with a good friend of mine who, he mentioned, like, we have one of those relationships where we can go, a year without talking and, pick up right where we left off, and yeah, like, he was considering, like, whether or not he should take like, a risk, though it involves some pretty big change, in his life, going for a different type of career or things like that, and one of the things that I brought up was, like, he's wanted to do one of 2 things for as long as I've known him, but again, it's always at that fork in the road, and they're not things that he can just step into. There's something that's out of his control in both situations. But one of the big things I told him was like, figure like you've wanted to do these things, but when looking at this and with your family now, figure out, like spend some time figuring out the why you really want to do this, and realize too that the first answer that comes to mind isn't going to be the real why. It's not going to be wrong, but you're going to have to, like dig into a little bit deeper to find out why you want those things. And I use money as an example. I was like, or in the case of his wife, it was like, they have a newborn son and everything. And like, she may not want to take the risk because, it might be a couple like, with the family dynamic, but if you really ask, it might be a couple of specific things, like there are grandparents around here to help with a newborn, and financial risk of how long can they support until things take hold. And I was like, those are things you can figure out, and you might find out like, okay, I actually only need to get to this point, like, maybe wait 2 years till the baby's a little older, save money for 2 years, and then you're in a good place to take the shot if you still want to. It's something like, rather than keeping it like a big open-ended thing, which is where he was stuck. So
Mhm.
yeah, so it's just funny, like, to me, like I said, like, where, what really hit me, what you said was, like, a lot of people don't realize the specific reason they want something, and they basically lose it, like, they just focus on the carrot, but they're not even sure about why they're chasing it.
Yeah, 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 and that's so common. Like we get so used to chasing the thing that maybe now chasing it has either become pointless, or our goals have changed, or our interests have changed, and but we're so used to doing that part of the improvement that we just forget that to examine whether we should be continuing with it.
Yeah, so I'm really curious with this, like, so in some of those situations that you mentioned, like, where people have been in those cases, like trying to figure out become wealthier, chase more money, and you help them find out that the reason they're looking for it they already have. So, what is like the next step for people like that, or to, I mean, I don't even know how to describe it, like to do it themselves or to do it their time, like, to point their interest at.
Well, yeah. So in a way, that does have to be done a little carefully because any change in your life produces grief, especially any major change. I mean, heck, even just like changing cars produces a little pangs of grief. We get attached to certain things. We get attached to our own behaviors. And so, if we follow the money example, although there are others, if somebody has to change, or well, they don't have to, but if somebody decides that it's right to change behaviors and stop trying to improve this area that's already as good as it needs to be, knowing that they're going to have some emotions come up about changing their behaviors is important, because if I identify myself as someone who's always improving in this area, and I have to shift that perspective to somebody who's not going to focus on that anymore, that's going to produce some emotions in me. I'm going to have to detach from that part of the image of myself. You have the same thing with anybody who does strongman. At some point, they will peak and they will no longer be able to add another plate ever again. That
Hmm.
you
Yep.
at some point, either you reach the end of your genetics, or you crest that age barrier where you can't add anymore. And if you have identified yourself as somebody who is always getting stronger, and then you pass that barrier where that's no longer possible, you have to detach from that part of your image of yourself, and that's going to produce sadness, and it's going to produce often some type of dissatisfaction. And the one thing that's really going to happen is it's going to absolutely necessitate, that you replace it with some other thing that you identify yourself with. Um, Hopefully not one that you have to beat yourself into the ground chasing, because the whole point of this is to not turn yourself into an endless self-improvement project.
Mhm.
But you have to, okay, if I'm no longer the person who's always adding a plate to the bar or always making more money, who am I now? And that's a very difficult question. But if you know to watch for that question and you know it needs answered, it's way
Uh,
easier. A lot of people will accidentally not answer it, and then it's 5 years later and they
right.
suddenly wonder why they feel crazy.
So you ended up going into one of the exact questions I was going to ask you. The way I was going to ask it before you started, like going into it anyway, was yeah, what about people who their self improvement is something that has like either a deadline or an exact objective, and then either that's crossed or the deadline ends. And yeah, I was thinking exactly of that, or like the an athlete who reaches that pinnacle. Because I know it's fairly common, and have talked to some and heard others speak about when an athlete wins the Super Bowl or wins a World Series championship or something, or retires again after like a Hall of Fame career, is yeah, like depression can be a very real thing if they haven't figured out exactly what you're talking about, what their
Hmm.
next identity in essence is going to be.
Yeah.
So with those, there seems to be, and that's not just an end, like that's not just a back end thing too. Like I think that's a big issue in younger athletes as well. Like either because basically like if they stop playing, but it could be just when a high school athlete graduates, if they're not playing in college, like the Al Bundys of the world. Um, and I hope people that are listening got that. But or and just college athletes, same thing. Like if they don't make the pros like they thought they might, or just a career ends it, like anything like that. Like those are all huge changes that if they spent most of their life focusing on becoming better and better at that thing, if they're not properly prepared to handle what comes next, it can be a really tough time and a dangerous time too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I was telling somebody the stories of, if you ever get curious about it, the exact same thing uh, happened to a lot of astronauts. Because especially once you've walked on the moon, what's left? Like that's it. So, and a lot of those guys had struggles with that too. Buzz Aldrin's ended up doing all right, but like, yeah, once you peak, if you don't know how to shift, it's going to be difficult.
An example of this actually just happened to pop up on my social media yesterday. And out of nowhere, just showing up, people started realizing, and I don't think this is the first time. I think this has happened before, but that Randy Johnson, as in like, Arizona Diamondbacks, Seattle Mariners Hall of Fame pitcher Randy Johnson, um, is now a like photographer for the NFL. It's like, okay. Yeah, they just like showed him, on the sidelines of like a football game with one of those huge sports cameras. And people were blown away at this. They're like, again, because they're like, here's like a guy known to the public as being like one of the most dominating pitchers in Major League history. And he's taking pictures in an NFL game.
I
But
love that.
me too, man. I was like, this is actually amazing. And what's funny is, you and I have photographer friends and stuff like that too. I also look at it and know that it's funny to me because it's an exciting thing like the NFL, but something like photography is normally it's a fairly peaceful endeavor. So I
Hmm.
mean, whether it's an NFL game or not, like that's kind of a pretty like way to relax. So he's almost, to me, it's like he's found that like retired, like that old samurai in the garden type of feel. You know, that was like the type of image I thought. Like, he had like he did his thing, he made it, and now he's doing something that he just likes. Because there's no way he's not doing this for any other reason.
Yeah.
And side note, his logo. Do you know the Randy Johnson story? Tangent of like the bird. So one of his this is amazing. This happened stories is in a live baseball game. You can find it on YouTube. There's a clip of him throwing a pitch.
Oh, is he the one that blew up the bird?
Exactly, the
Yeah, oh
bird.
no, I've seen that clip. I just didn't know who it was.
Exactly. Yeah, he's the one that like that happened, and his logo is like an upside down bird with some feathers rolling around it. That's his photography logo. um, so yeah, so I mean, so as I just thought that was a great example of a guy who hit a peak and then just rather than like I mean if people disappear because that's what they want to do, that's awesome. But yeah, he just found something else that he wants to like keep himself involved in and
Yeah,
goes and does it.
and Freeman, who doesn't know what we're talking about, like, just go to YouTube and type in Randy Johnson bird, and like, it's this bizarre 1 in a billion chance where the pitcher throws and a bird just happens to fly right in front of it at the bat, and basically feathers just explode everywhere when the ball
Yep.
hits it.
Yeah, it really one of the
I
craziest.
would love to know the math on how unlikely that is, to be
Yeah,
honest.
like yeah, one of the craziest moments in sports history. Um, but yeah, to bring it back, like such a great example of an athlete who did something like that. Um, but so back like people take like so like you started talking about the self help section in bookstores, like you said, that's enormous. Like I know So what about ones that are more based on personal development, for lack of a better term? I'm not as well versed with those because I kind of started my journey into reading more self-development books, kind of like you mentioned, to focus more on business or on
Mhm.
training from the strength and conditioning side. But I know books like uh, Chicken Soup for the Soul, things like that, they have sold over like a billion copies, and they're helping speaking more to an individual. So I haven't read those, but
Well,
presuming that.
I can tell because those are self improvement books.
Oh, okay. I thought they were. Um,
No, no, they're largely a kind of a collection of stories that are maybe somewhat inspirational, and they're emotionally touching, but not a lot of self improvement advice in there.
okay. Well, let me rephrase then. Books that are basically only meant on like helping you quote unquote be better, live a better life, however you want to put it. So where there is no end goal or there is no
Mhm.
objective goal, like money or a championship, what's something like helping people like that think like, okay, like
Well,
like making. And I feel like the answer is going to be making progress, or just kind of realizing if you are, and that if you made progress, it's okay, but that finding where a point of diminishing returns might be. But go ahead,
well,
yeah.
tell you what, my answer is going to come a little bit out of left field because most people don't think about it in this way. Uh, One of the things that a person really should do, especially today, this is less important maybe 30, 40 years ago. And hopefully in 20 years, it won't be as important. But today, a person really should figure out what is their relationship to hustle culture.
Ooh.
Because one of the things, because a lot of the self-improvement books are from either sports performance or from business or from finance, and then you have some of the ones that are just more directly psychology. But what has happened is we've seen this shift in cultural awareness. And America has always had a very puritanistic work ethic based culture. But over the past, let's say, 20 years or so, that has distilled and intensified to a point where people and it's really where the whole phrase you're not an endless self-improvement project, that's where I came up with that, is because most people have a relationship with hustle culture that is inappropriate to their actual psychology. uh, like I saw on your feed the other day, um, david goggins David Goggins' mindset is appropriate to your psychology.
Hmm.
He is not appropriate to everyone's psychology,
Right.
but he's a big figure in hustle culture. a lot of people will accidentally take the things he says and make them poisonous to themselves because they don't their actual like inborn psychology and their learned psychology doesn't really fit with the whole willpower yourself through everything, or maybe the structure of their life doesn't fit with that. I work with people in relationships, right? Like some people try and apply David Goggins mindset to changing their spouse. That's
Oh,
horrifying.
it's
Like
like
that's
God.
yeah, and of course he doesn't know to say not to do that, right? Like it's not his fault. So I'm not coming at him or nothing. But a lot of people like get this relationship with hustle culture, and they're like, aha, I have willpowered myself into an ultra marathon, therefore I can willpower myself into, and they like pick the wrong thing. And so I use that as a microcosm, but like figuring out what's your relationship to the idea of using hard work and willpower and all of those things that are part of hustle culture to make changes in your life is really an important thing for people to examine.
Yeah, I think that was a very good explanation of it. I at least was following 100%. So,
Yeah.
um, and yeah, because it's like, and yeah, that is something that a lot of people definitely struggle with. I feel like is even realizing that type of thing. Because if you, let's say you pick like using book, like let's say books and exam or podcasts are the same thing, just for sake of this experiment. If you pick 10 different ones and listen to them, read them again, you're going to see a lot of the same lessons or like lessons, a lot of the same advice, things like that. But you will see, as long as you try to actually pick from like different parts, you're going to see a lot of different approaches to it. And it's funny because I had that David Goggins thing, and yeah, like I really like his book, and then like I
Mhm.
realized I'm like I realize seasons of life, like not seasons as in I'm getting close to an end. Aha, not that. But I realize like different parts of life. Like I look at that Goggins and I'm like, me 20 years ago would have been 100% on board with this guy. Me now really, really appreciates it and loves his ability to do it. But me now also understands there are some ways that I want to do this and other ways I have no interest in. And that's something that I know can be hard for a lot of people.
And that's exactly it. So you're looking at your relationship with hustle culture.
Yeah, it's like and realize I've been lucky enough to realize which ones I feel completely good with being done or just simply being at the level they're at or get better, like things like that. 20 years ago, me was the I need to be. I guess this is me now is I want to be the best version of myself that I can be and live to the best version of myself. Me 20 years ago was I need to actually be the best. And that is like that, yeah, that's a huge difference. And me 20 years ago still realized there's a really small chance of that. Like, but nevertheless, it's a big shift. And since I spend like all my time training, so much time learning about training, and it's prepared me for a lot of things, but it's definitely changed. And what's funny is, I said to bring that around is yesterday I finished. I'd read it before, but I was on a reread. Is I finished the Four Agreements, which is a
Oh yeah, you were telling me about that.
completely different style of book that can't hurt me or something or one of those.
Mhm.
I mean, even it's I was listening to the audiobook, and even the audiobook, because like every time, he's talking in a really slow, calm voice. Anytime there's a break in it, there's like tribal flutes playing. It's like, so it's just funny, like so, like that, like I said, like that is a completely different style. But honestly, if you look at it, some of the lessons are still, or advice lessons are still going to be the same.
Mhm.
But I said, but it's like the style that it's taken in, and I feel like that really feeds into the hustle culture, like you're saying.
Yeah. Well, and the thing I'd be curious about, the thing I think would be valuable for people to hear is, uh, if you were going to try and pinpoint a thing or two that helped you move from I need to be the best to I need to just be the best version of myself, What would you point to that helped you make that shift? Because if I could like package that up and give it to everyone, oh my god, I would.
Oh man. I mean, I wish I could come up with something more specific and singular because I know it was. I mean, for me, I would like going through. Oh man, you put that. That's such a hard question to put me in the spot with. Um,
Counselors are annoying. We ask these like hard questions that nobody can answer easily.
yeah, it's because you're good at picking out things that I say. So yeah, I'll just go like part of it has definitely been going through multiple cycles. So of going really hard for things, seeing improvement, so seeing where those things like make a difference, and then also having having the desire to do those things either fade away or just cut or just making mistakes um and going through like a failure of it, but like taking the lessons from that in time. Like it's basically been that cycle, but then just but like time allows multiple of those cycles to go through. And I want to say like the kind of external one has been just relationships that I've made in the process, whether I still have them or not.
Mhm.
Like like just all those things have helped go from one side to the other.
So if I capture that in a sentence or two, it sounds like that doing the I must be the best and like sometimes getting there, sometimes failing, kind of helped you put put in your head an idea of what's good enough for you. Like, okay, well, I didn't get all the way, but I got these relationships. I didn't get all the way, but I got these improvements, and these are good.
Right, exactly. I live in a mixture of places where I still want to like, constantly improve every day or over time, and places where I'm happy with the achievements that have been made. And
Mhm.
now there aren't I haven't necessarily closed any off, but if they don't happen, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, yeah. You're the type of person, and I think I am too, where it's hard to say, okay, I'm going to now forget about this and never work on improving it. It's more like you circle back a little less often, maybe.
Right. Um, it also helps being educated in the field that you're or like what you're talking about too. Because I'm well, to this point, I'm lucky enough to where, well, maybe like I consider it lucky, maybe not, but to this point, most of my interests are in my field. Like I don't have a ton of interests, but I have a lot of time. So maybe I'll find my Randy Johnson moment later. It's like, but so for me, for example, like I'm educated in what my interests, such as like my main interest have been before it was competing, always strength training. Um, and now yeah like business and just finding ways to grow and make that better, and in each of those I can look at them from the educated side, and I know the external factors that play, like with lifting, like you were meant like just like you were saying with talking about competitive athletes. I know that I can get stronger because you can do that longer than anything else. Like you can get stronger longer than you can get faster. Like, there's a point where like if you're a speed-based athlete, it's like that's gonna get rough. Heck, that's rough once you're 30.
Yeah.
Uh, but if you're training to get strength, to get stronger, you can do that for a pretty long time because it's such a slow thing. And I mean, like old man strength comes from the thing. Like that's a real thing. Like,
Hmm.
not if you're only getting old, but if you put in the work for decades, it's a very real thing. So luckily, I know that, and I know living examples of that. So I'm like, okay, even if I'm not at my strongest that I've ever been right now, I actually have I have time and the ability to get there again if I focus on it. So that helps with a lot with that type of mentality. Is like knowing how it works. So if it's something where I wouldn't know how it actually develops or how it works, it might be a little bit different because I might end up in a position of wanting to do it and then suddenly finding out that I can't, you know, or like that missed a shot, but luckily I don't have those.
Or that you're not willing to pay the price because
Oh, yeah,
sometimes that's
yeah. Yep. Yep. Exactly. Right. Yeah. Very true.
Yeah. Matter of fact, you know, we're both approaching midlife. If I sit and think about it, I can immediately come up with like four or five things that I've said, okay, improving any further in this area doesn't make much sense. I think I'm going to let this one, you know, just go and be on autopilot or fall by the wayside. And one of the things I've found is very helpful to people is knowing that everyone has those. Because I think a lot of people, we talk about their relationship with hustle culture. A lot of people, since this doesn't get talked about much, and especially people don't like to talk about their failures, you never see that on social media, uh, they don't realize that people got a lot of stuff behind them that they just said, okay, improving this makes no more sense. So I'm going to share a couple of mine because I have one that I abandoned or am probably going to abandon. I'm certainly examining it right now. Just this year, I used to have weightlifting goals. Yeah, I wanted to be able to deadlift 2 times my body weight. Squat 1.5 times my body weight, bench 1.25 times, and overhead press 1 times my body weight. After that whole nerve pain incident, turns out one of my bigger goals in life is to never have nerve pain again. And
Mhm.
so I'm presently examining whether or not those weightlifting goals can fit in with my now much more important goal of never ever having that happen again. Uh, and I honestly don't know. I'll have to talk to maybe talk to you about it a little more, talk to Nick about it a little more, and see get the opinions of people who know more than me. Um, but fitness
Makes
wise,
sense.
I abandoned 6-pack abs a couple of years ago because I started lifting. I was doing a lot of bodybuilding. I was like, okay, that's the final thing. I've always wanted to try having 6-pack abs, and I got down to having some abdominal definition, and that was so miserable, like so utterly miserable that I was like, you know what? Okay, this was a neat experiment. I'm glad I tried this experiment. I will never be trying this experiment again, ever.
So I had abs once, and like for a time, I don't mean like once. And my one regret, I don't remember how they actually came in, like how many, so I can't remember if it was 6. But my one regret is that they hadn't figured out smartphones yet, so I could have proof.
Oh yeah.
One of those things. It's like, yeah, no, there's nothing like that. Yeah, but like, I mean, and nerve pain is crazy. You pointed out something really good in that is the point when something new that was never important to you before, like, does come up and become more important in realizing that. And like when I was talking to my friend I mentioned a couple days ago, that also came up in the conversation actually. And so so it's really crazy to me seeing how these things are coming together. Um, like something I mentioned to him, and like figuring out what he wants to do is, like he mentioned the house, like my house. And I told him, I was like, like I never, buying a house is not something that I always wanted to do. Like I actually spent a lot of time being sort of anti against buying a house, or at least like anti the message of like, you need to do this. Um, and again, just for like financial math reasons, depending on whether you wanted to lock yourself into money or like into having to pay X amount or something. But yeah, it's
And
just
don't forget having a staff. It's pretty sweet when the dishwasher breaks and that's somebody else's problem and not your
exactly,
problem.
exactly the responsibility. So like it was one example, like, yeah, having a house, having property is not something that was always on my dream list, but it got there when when like other things matched. So like, things came together and then something that I wasn't interested in came up. It's not that I had like actual like vitriol towards buying a house. I just was like, hey, like the very common message of you should try to buy a house early is not for everybody.
Right.
And then it finally hit that point. And so, and again, there's a lot of time left, hopefully, but I am curious. It's like, am I going to be one of those people who actually gets away with only buying one house? It's like, um, Like, or I mean, at least to like live in and not because I hate moving. I've moved way too much in my life. So if I can get away with this being the last like real one, that'd be awesome. It's
When we moved into our house, my first house a couple years ago, and that whole process was not the move so much, but the whole getting the loan and the paperwork and like that was so miserable. I told my wife, I said, "You better enjoy this place because this ain't never happening again. I am never."
yeah.
We'll see if that ends up being true, but
Right. So it goes what we were saying, like at the near the beginning about there can be like you said, like there's always like when there's a change, there's grief, and want people to like realize that one, like just because you like told yourself you have an idea, or you told yourself you're working for something, or told yourself you have a belief in something, doesn't mean that it being different later is a bad thing. And I feel like again that's so common is that people do get so married to what they believe to be a belief and opinion. There's a lot of like cement these in black and white messaging happening out there. It's like that's never been the way this type of stuff worked before, so like the fact that there's messaging like that right now is unfortunate because it's
yeah.
supposed to be an organic living like breathing thing based on new experiences, things we learn, just simply like maturing or just changing our mind.
You know what? Hold on, I got to hover around that. That's a wonderful way to phrase that. That your self improvement should be organic. Because man, yeah, you plant a tree, and you maybe have a rough idea of what shape that's going to take, but it's going to branch off in directions that are outside of your control. Uh, and it's not going to necessarily be a perfectly shaped tree. Uh, yeah, I love that imagery because that's I think what a lot of people accidentally do, and they turn themselves into this rigid, horrifying self-improvement projects because they have an idea of what the tree is supposed to look like, and they spend their whole life trying to mangle the branches into what it was supposed to look like.
Yeah, that is it. It's like I mean that's exactly it. And I said I know people that has happened to, and I said it's just like when I was more hardcore, like I said, like I was very resistant to doing anything else. Overly resistant. And like I said, I just had no interest in those things. And like I wish some of those things might have been handled better or just gone better or tried some of those things maybe, but I don't regret being that obsessive into those things for the time that I was. Because I legitimately was doing it because I liked it. At least
Yeah,
there was that. Like, but as it as the things changed, kind of went away from it a little bit. I may like the grief part of this again. I may have been weird, like felt weird about it for a little while. Like when I realized that I was likely done fighting, because like doing MMA competitions, because that type of training had been such a big thing for me for a while. It was weird for a while because the reason that my last competition fight was my last competition fight is because everything around me kind of disappeared. Like there weren't gyms that did it in the area yet. There were,
mm,
small specific ones like there was jujitsu gym, boxing gym, but lost the only training partners who basically were like doing it with me. Plus my work schedule got busy. So it's one of those things that just kind of like went in the direction of not training, not fighting as much. And then
yeah.
but then it took but then as I got just more into that and interested into that, went through that grief process. And like I said, now I'm completely okay with the fact that my last fight was my last fight. Like it didn't happen on purpose. It didn't happen anything like that. But it's like I said, like okay, I'm actually completely okay with the way this ended.
Mhm. Well, and let me say something because there's a good thing to notice because you touched on it, but I want to make sure everyone noticed it. You know, so in a way, this conversation about you're not an endless self improvement project. We're maybe not necessarily talking to past Jerry as the obsessive because it ended up working out. Like your obsessions were not getting in the way of your life. They hopefully weren't destructive to relationships. You certainly ended up in a pretty good place. So really, the person we're talking to uh, is the person who that's not the right fit. That level of
Mm.
obsession is not the right fit, either to their psychology or their genetics or whatever. So just notice, like, some people can be obsessive over improvement and end up in the right spot because that fits. Some people will not end up in the right spot with that, and that's really who we're talking to. Like, genetically, some people are more like built to be joggers versus sprinters. And in a way, the joggers are who we're talking to, who are trying to be sprinters.
Yeah, that's a good way to put that. So I actually like taking that. A good way to end this would be, some action steps or some homework. What would be action steps you would give to people, like, um, to help themselves through this? Like I said, like, or when let's say they have noticed that, or like they're at the precipice of feeling like they need to change. What would be some action steps for helping people make that decision and what to actually do next?
As in, like, to change their relationship with improvement and hustle culture, you mean, right?
Right. Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. Step one, e- easy, good first step almost always is figure out where it came from. Like, where did you adopt this set of ideas from? Parents are, an easy and obvious example, but it could have been coaches, it could have been teachers, it could have been books, it could have been, who knows. The overarching culture right now is very in love with hustle and grind and all those kind of buzzwords. But if you know where it came from, the major help that provides is it lets you know whether or not this came from inside of you. Because some of us just like really love to always be, doing something to like become the best. Most of us get that from somewhere else. And if we got it from somewhere else, it might not be the right message for us. So number one, always figure out where it came from, it to the best of your ability. And number two, experiment to the extent possible with what's the right methods. So like, let's take mindset methods. You got David Goggins, willpower yourself through everything. You got some of the softer stuff like Wayne Dyer, like very psychological, touchy-feely stuff. But experiment with what are the mindsets that are right? What are the activity levels that are right for you? Um, 38-year-old JP cannot sustain the same activity level that 32-year-old JP could. So I have to change how my relationship with my physical training is, based on just what I'm capable of. So do little experiments, see what fits, and if it fits better, it's probably the right thing for you, at least for now. And here's the main part, because I gave those two bullet points to give this one because it's really the most important. If something works well for you and if it seems right for you, do your best, because it's not possible to do it completely, but do your best to ignore what other people say or think you should be doing.
That's
Uh,
yeah, good one.
yeah, because we'll look at social media and be like, this person will be like, oh man, you got to do it this way. And happily, I have enough experience, and I'll be like, no, no, I definitely know that method will not work for me because I've tried that and sampled it, and that's a mess. But those messages are always present from well-meaning others, whether
Mhm.
they're content creators, parents, friends, whoever, and try to ignore those messages of, oh, you should be improving this way instead of the ways fit best.
Yeah, there is a lot of black and white, this is the right way advice rather than like lessons and ideas and mindsets to advice instead, which would
Yeah.
be more applicable. Actually, for example, like one huge one I know that I can't stand is the like 5 a.m. club or whatever you want to call it, million things like Gary, I guarantee you go look, 30% at least of the advice is going to say something like you have to wake up earlier than everybody else. You have to wake up at 5 a.m., wake up at 4 a.m., something like that. And it's like that,
Hmm.
if like you're saying, like we're saying, that works for some people. And that some people who are not doing that may find a lot of benefit from doing that. I know a lot of people who wake up really early and love it and swear by it. but that is not just simply black and white end table advice. Some people absolutely do not work well trying to wake up earlier. It doesn't help anything.
Yeah. And here's the value of experimentation, because I actually know when I am doing a work sprint, that is terrible. Like if I have a lot of stuff happening, I can't be in the 4 a.m. club. But when things are slow and I don't have a ton of stuff that's under deadline, I love being in the 4 a.m. club. Get up,
Yeah,
nothing's happening. The whole world is just silent and shuts the hell up for a minute. Oh man, beautiful. But if I'm on a work sprint, ain't no such thing as 4 a.m. club for me.
that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so final question, and this is one of those specific ones. Let's say again, somebody has, been like, let's say somebody has done that, like they've decided something they've really been pushing on, that some form of self improvement path slash hustle. They're gonna like they want to stop it, they want to change it. They decided like that's not the thing. They've had blinders on, so they kind of they're in that period where they can't seem to help themselves think about anything else. So it's either keep going or literally like sit and do nothing. What can those people do to help think about things that are like on the outside that they could possibly get into? Not even as a have to be activity, but so that their only reaction isn't sitting around and being like depressed, bored, etc.
So that is a really great question. Here's the thing that comes immediately to mind, and I hope it's a good final answer. But we'll see after I've had a day to think about it if I'm still satisfied with what I give you here. Um, is I would consume things, videos, podcasts, and I would just sample people. So um, let's say I'm getting out of the like willpower myself through everything mindset. I recognize that's no good. So I would just either look it up yourself or ask friends like, hey, what kind of mindset stuff do you like? Sample a few things, and here's what'll happen.
Mhm.
You'll you'll come across somebody else with a different message, and eventually you'll hear somebody say something and you resonate. It's kind of like when you play music, you can hear when notes fit together and you can hear when they don't fit together. Whenever you hear messages and you get one you resonate with, that's one to explore. So maybe somebody's like, oh shoot, okay, I know I need to make a change. I don't know what the hell to do. uh, you know, Maybe you listen to a few things from Gary Vaynerchuk and Jocko Willink and who's big in Gabor Mate is a great one. Um, and then somebody will eventually resonate with you, and you're like, oh, let me see what this person has more to say of. Follow that, and that will probably lead you into at least something new to sample.
That's good. And I want to add one to that you mentioned is if you're if what you've been pushing for like towards and hustling at has caused you to say no to a lot of things or a lot of people, is sample things afterwards by saying yes more often than you'd like to. Because like especially the deeper you dive into things, it's very common or easy to turn down opportunities to do other things, whether they're serious or just hanging out, having fun with people asking you to do that. So, like if you have been in that situation, so if that fits you, try saying yes to like two more of those things. And I said almost for that purpose of sampling and figuring it
Yep.
out. So like maybe just find new people, find like new hobbies, new things like that you like. Or even if you don't, you know. It's like
Yeah.
it's really either way. Like I said, you do that like because that's funny because I had some of those periods. I was a very like put all of my time into things. So in periods of like after each those different like chapters or whatever you want to call them, pretty much like ended or slowed down, I would have periods of being like, okay, like I'm going to try more things that I haven't tried before, where people ask me or something like that. And in most cases, I didn't get into it or like it, but I know. So it's like that helps. So it's like, okay, like I don't it's not that I don't never tried these things. It's like, oh, that just didn't speak to me, didn't do it. So now I know. It's like,
Yeah, absolutely.
so good try.
All
So
right, man. Well, a terrific talk today.
yeah,
Thanks.
great way to start this morning. Hope we helped you guys out. As always, like I said, find these things that resonate, even if it's just a couple of sentences. I mean, that's really the most you can ask for. It's a couple of things, couple pieces of advice. Hopefully, help you out, help you make your day a little bit better. And we'll catch you guys later.
See y'all.